"Did you like the car I told you about, Mom?" My son asked it casually. Too casually. I looked at him, confused, my hand still wrapped around a glass of iced tea that had already started to sweat in the late afternoon heat. "What car?" I asked. For a second, just a second, something flickered across his face. Then Claire stepped in. My daughter-in-law smiled, that same polished smile I had seen 100 times before. The kind that never quite reached her eyes. "The Lexus," she said lightly. "Daniel mentioned it. We thought you knew." I didn't. And in that moment, I felt it, that quiet shift inside me. The kind that doesn't scream. The kind that settles in your chest and whispers, "Something isn't right. I'm glad you're here. Stay with me until the end. And tell me where you're watching from. I'd like to know just how far this story travels." Because what I uncovered after that simple question changed everything I thought I knew about my own family. For the past few weeks, I had been trying to reach Claire. Calling, texting, even leaving a voicemail once, though I rarely did that. No response. At first, I told myself she was busy. She and Daniel both worked long hours. Their lives were full: meetings, dinners, trips I only heard about in passing. But after the fifth call went unanswered, I noticed something strange. The phone didn't ring anymore. It went straight to silence. No voicemail, no tone, just nothing. I remember sitting at my kitchen table that morning, staring at my phone like it might explain itself if I waited long enough. Then it hit me. She hadn't missed my calls. She had blocked me. I didn't say it out loud. I didn't need to. The realization settled quietly, like dust on an old shelf. At 71, you learn to recognize silence. You learn the difference between someone who is busy and someone who is choosing not to hear you at all. I didn't confront them. Not right away. That's not how I was raised. And truthfully, I wasn't even sure what I would say. So I waited. 3 weeks later, I drove over to their house unannounced. Not out of anger, just curiosity. The kind that grows when things stop making sense. That's when I saw it. Parked in their driveway like it had always belonged there. A brand new black Lexus. The kind you don't just pick up without planning. The kind that shines differently under the sun. Like it knows exactly what it costs. Claire stepped out of it, keys in hand, sunglasses perched perfectly on her face. She saw me. Paused. Then smiled. That same smile. "Oh, this," she said when I glanced at the car. "We worked really hard for it." I nodded. Of course I did. But as I stood there, watching her walk past me like nothing had changed, I felt something shift again. Because I knew my son. I knew his salary, his habits, his limits. And this car. It didn't fit. That evening, I went home and sat down at my desk. I opened a drawer I hadn't touched in months, the one where I kept my bank statements. Neatly stacked, just the way my husband used to like them. I wasn't looking for anything specific. At least, that's what I told myself. But as I flipped through the pages, one line caught my eye. A payment. Then another. Same amount, same date, every month. My name on the account. But not for anything I recognized. I stared at the numbers, my fingers going still against the paper. And for the first time in a very long time, I realized I needed to start asking questions I had spent years avoiding. Because whatever this was, it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was something that had been happening right in front of me. Quietly. Carefully. And without my knowledge. For the past 2 years, I had been careful with every dollar. Not out of fear. Just habit. After my husband passed, I learned how quiet money could be. How it moved in small, steady ways: groceries, utilities, the occasional doctor's visit. Nothing extravagant, nothing unnecessary. I wore the same coat every winter. Cooked at home. Turned the thermostat down a few degrees at night without thinking twice. It wasn't a hard life. It was just simple. And I told myself that was enough. Daniel never really asked about my finances. Not directly. He would call back when he still called and say things like, "You're doing okay, right, Mom?" in that quick, distracted tone people use when they already expect the answer. And I always gave it to him. "I'm fine," I'd say. Because I was. Or at least, I thought I was. Claire, on the other hand, had a different way of asking. She didn't ask about money. She asked about comfort. "You shouldn't have to worry about anything at your age," she once told me, her voice soft, almost concerned. "Daniel and I can help manage things if it ever gets overwhelming." I remember smiling at her across the kitchen table. "I've managed just fine for 40 years," I said. She smiled back. But there was something in her eyes I didn't recognize back then. Something measured. Looking back, the distance didn't happen all at once. It was gradual. Like everything else. Sunday calls became text messages. Text messages became short replies. Short replies became silence. And then, that silence turned into something more deliberate. Something chosen. I sat at my desk that evening. The bank statement spread out in front of me. The soft yellow light from the lamp casting long shadows across the paper. One payment could be a mistake. Two, maybe a coincidence. But 12? 20? Month after month, the same amount, withdrawn on the same day. Labeled in a way that felt intentionally vague. Auto pay. That was all it said. No company name I recognized. No explanation. Just numbers. Steady, quiet, persistent. I ran my finger down the column. My heart not racing, but slowing. That's the thing about reaching my age. You don't panic easily. You observe. You take your time. And you remember. I went to the kitchen, poured myself a cup of coffee even though it was already late, and stood by the window, looking out at the dark street. That car. The shine of it, the confidence in the way Claire held those keys. And the way she said it. We worked really hard for it. Maybe they did. But not like this. Not in a way that matched what I was seeing in front of me. The next morning, I went to the bank. Not because I was angry. Not yet. Just because I needed to understand. The young man at the counter greeted me politely. The way they always do. I recognized him vaguely. He'd helped me once before with a deposit. "I'd like to review some recurring payments on my account," I said, sliding one of the statements across the desk. He nodded, typing quickly, his eyes scanning the screen. Then he paused. Just for a moment. "Is something wrong?" I asked. He hesitated, then turned the monitor slightly toward me. "Ma'am, these payments," he said carefully, "they're tied to an auto loan." I felt my fingers tighten slightly around the edge of the desk. "An auto loan?" I repeated. "Yes, ma'am," he said, "a luxury vehicle lease, from what I can see." The words settled slowly. Not like a shock. More like a weight. "And, whose name is on that loan?" I asked. He clicked again. Looked at the screen. Then back at me. And in that small, quiet moment, everything I thought I understood started to come apart. "Mrs. Carter, the loan is under your name." The young man said it carefully. Gently, like he wasn't sure how hard the words would land. I didn't react right away. I just looked at the screen. There it was, my name, clear as day, attached to a loan I had never agreed to. Never signed for, at least. Not knowingly. "And the vehicle?" I asked. He clicked once more. "A 2024 Lexus RX. He said, "Black, financed 18 months ago." 18 months. I did the math in my head without meaning to. That was around the time Claire started talking about managing things. Around the time Daniel stopped asking questions. Around the time my paperwork had passed through their hands more than once. I nodded slowly. "Can you print that for me?" I asked. Of course. I drove home in silence. Not because I didn't have thoughts. But because I had too many. They moved through me quietly. Like pieces of something long buried finally rising to the surface. I parked in my driveway and sat there for a moment. The engine off, my hands still resting on the steering wheel. Claire's voice echoed in my mind. "You shouldn't have to worry about anything at your age." I almost smiled. That afternoon, I pulled out an old folder from the cabinet in my study. Inside were documents I hadn't looked at in years. Insurance forms, bank updates, authorization papers. The kind of things you sign without thinking too much about it, when you trust the people sitting across from you. I laid them out one by one on the table. Dates. Signatures. My signature. I traced over it with my finger. The ink slightly faded but still unmistakably mine. But I didn't remember signing for any car. Not a loan, not a lease, not anything close. What I did remember were a few visits. Claire sitting beside me at the bank. Smiling, explaining things quickly. "Oh, it's just an update, Mom, routine paperwork." Daniel nodding along. "It'll make everything easier." I had signed. Of course I had. That evening, I made myself dinner. Nothing special, soup and a slice of bread. I sat at the table, the papers stacked neatly beside me, and ate slowly. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Anger comes fast. This was something else. This was understanding. After dinner, I called the number listed on the loan statement. A customer service line, polite, efficient. "Thank you for calling," the woman said. "How can I assist you today?" "I'm calling about an auto loan under my name," I said. She asked for verification. I gave it. There was a pause as she pulled up the account. Then, "Yes, Mrs. Carter," she said, "I see the account here. Payments have been made consistently from your primary checking account." "I see," I replied. "And the authorized cosigner?" I asked. Another pause. "Yes," she said, "there is an authorized user listed." My grip tightened slightly on the phone. "Could you tell me the name?" There was a brief hesitation, just long enough to notice. Then she said it. "Claire Carter." I closed my eyes for a moment. Not in disbelief. Not even in pain. Just to let the truth settle exactly where it belonged. When I opened them again, everything felt clearer. Cleaner. Like a fog had finally lifted. She hadn't just blocked my calls. She had made sure I couldn't ask questions. And for a long time, I hadn't. I didn't confront her. Not that day. Not the next. At my age, you learn something important. Truth doesn't disappear just because you wait. It settles. It reveals itself in layers. If you're patient enough to let it. And I had been patient my whole life. That night, I sat in my living room with the folder open on my lap. The soft hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the house. Claire Carter. Authorized user. The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. They simply stayed. I leaned back in my chair and let my eyes drift across the room, past the bookshelf Daniel built for me when he was 16. Past the framed photo of my husband standing in the garden, smiling like nothing in the world could ever go wrong. We had built a life on trust. Quiet, steady trust. And somewhere along the way, I had handed that trust to the wrong person. The next morning, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years. "Margaret?" the voice on the other end said. Surprised. It's been a long time. It had. Thomas Green had handled my husband's estate when he passed. Careful, methodical, the kind of man who didn't miss details. "I need to ask you something," I said. He didn't ask questions, just told me to come by. His office hadn't changed. Same dark wood desk, same neatly stacked files, same quiet that made you feel like every word mattered. I handed him the documents. He read them slowly, thoroughly, his brow tightening just slightly as he moved from page to page. "Did you knowingly sign for this loan?" he asked. "No." "Did you authorize anyone to act on your behalf financially?" I paused. "I signed some documents," I said. "Claire said they were routine updates." He nodded once, not surprised. "That's usually how it starts," he said. He explained it carefully. Authorization forms, access permissions, small legal doors that, once opened, allow more than most people realize. "You didn't sign for the car directly," he said, "but you may have granted access that allowed her to attach this loan to your account." I sat quietly, absorbing each word. Not shocked. Just connecting pieces. "Can I stop it?" I asked. "Yes," he said, "but not without consequences." I looked at him. For her? For everyone involved. That afternoon, I drove past Daniel's house again. I didn't stop. I didn't need to. The Lexus was still there, gleaming in the sunlight like it belonged exactly where it was. Like it had been earned. I kept driving. When I got home, I sat down at my desk and opened a blank notepad. For the first time since this began, I didn't feel confused. I didn't feel hurt. I felt focused. I wrote down 3 things. Confirm all financial access permissions. Freeze unauthorized transactions. Say nothing until everything is clear. I set the pen down. Because this wasn't about anger. It wasn't even about betrayal anymore. It was about control. And for the first time in a long time, I realized I still had it. It's strange, the things you remember once the truth begins to settle. Not the big moments. Not the obvious ones. But the small, quiet details you once dismissed. I sat at my desk that evening, the notepad still open, Thomas's words lingering in the back of my mind. You may have granted access. Granted. Such a gentle word for something that now felt invasive. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes, letting my thoughts drift, not forward, but backward, trying to understand where it began. The first memory that surfaced wasn't dramatic. It was ordinary. Claire standing beside me at the bank. About a year and a half ago. Maybe a little longer. She had insisted on coming with me that day. You shouldn't have to handle all this alone, she said, her hand lightly touching my arm as if she were helping me across a busy street. Daniel had been there too. Quiet, supportive, letting her do most of the talking. The young teller had placed a stack of documents in front of me. Just some updates to your account, ma'am, he said. I remember glancing at Claire. She smiled. Just routine, she said. It'll make things easier for you later. Easier. I signed. Then there was another visit. Different day, same tone. Claire again, sitting close enough that our shoulders almost touched. This is just for online access, she explained, in case anything ever comes up. I had hesitated, just for a moment. I don't really use online banking, I said. That's exactly why, she replied, her voice soft, reassuring, so we can help if you need it. I signed again. Back then, it felt like care. Like support. Like family doing what family is supposed to do. Now, it felt like something else entirely. I opened my eyes and looked down at my hands resting in my lap. Steady. Not shaking. Not weak. Just older. Wiser, perhaps, than I had allowed myself to be. There were other things, too. Small things. Claire asking questions that seemed harmless at the time. How much do you usually keep in your checking account? Do you ever move money between accounts? Would it be easier if everything was just automatic? I had answered. Of course I had. You don't expect someone sitting at your table, drinking your coffee, calling you, Mom, to be collecting information. I stood up and walked to the bookshelf, my fingers brushing along the spines until I reached the photo frame tucked near the corner. Daniel at 12. Grinning, gap-toothed, proud of the wooden birdhouse he'd built with his father. I held the frame for a moment. He had always been kind. Gentle. But gentle doesn't always mean aware. And sometimes, not knowing is just as dangerous as knowing and saying nothing. I placed the photo back carefully. Then returned to my desk. The pieces were no longer scattered. They were aligning. Every signature, every routine visit, every carefully chosen word. None of it had been rushed. None of it had been accidental. It had been built slowly. Deliberately. I picked up my pen again and added one more line beneath the others. Identify exactly what she has access to. Because this wasn't just about a car. It wasn't even about the money anymore. It was about understanding the full extent of what had been done, quietly. Right in front of me. And I had a feeling. This was only the beginning. The next morning, I didn't rush. At my age, rushing usually leads to mistakes. And I had made enough of those already, quiet ones. Signed in ink, buried in paperwork I never thought to question. I dressed the same way I always did. Simple blouse, comfortable shoes, nothing that would draw attention. Because this wasn't about emotion. This was about clarity. I went back to the bank. The same young man looked up when I approached the desk. This time, he recognized me. Good morning, ma'am, he said. How can I help you today? I'd like a full review, I said, placing my folder down in front of him. All accounts, all authorized users, everything connected to my name. He nodded, more serious this time. Of course. It took longer than the day before. He brought in a supervisor, a woman in her 40s with calm eyes and a voice that didn't rush. They didn't explain everything at once. They showed me. Line by line. Account by account. Access permissions, linked services, automatic withdrawals. I listened. I didn't interrupt. Claire's name appeared more than once. Not just on the auto loan. Savings access. Secondary authorization on my primary checking account. Even limited access to a small investment account my husband had set up years ago. That access was granted through a signed authorization form. The supervisor explained gently. I nodded. I understand. Then came something I wasn't expecting. There were also 2 changes made to your contact preferences. She continued. What kind of changes? I asked. She turned the screen slightly toward me. Primary contact redirected to a secondary number. She said, and notification settings, reduced. Reduced. I stared at the screen for a moment. So if the bank needed to reach me, I said slowly, they would have contacted the number listed as primary. She replied. Claire. I sat back in my chair. Not shocked. Just precise in my thinking now. She hadn't just taken access. She had controlled the flow of information. Quietly. Carefully. Can these permissions be removed? I asked. Yes, the supervisor said. Immediately, if you'd like. I folded my hands together on the desk. Yes, I said, I would. They worked in silence after that. Clicking, confirming, printing. One by one, the connections were severed. Access revoked. Notifications restored. Control returned. When it was done, the supervisor handed me a final document. This confirms all changes, she said. You now have sole control over your accounts. I took the paper. Thank you, I said. And I meant it. Outside, the air felt different. Not lighter. Just clearer. I sat in my car for a moment before starting the engine. Claire had built something. Not loudly. Not recklessly. But methodically. And for a while, it had worked. That afternoon, I didn't call Daniel. I didn't go to their house. I didn't send a message. Because this wasn't the part where I spoke. This was the part where I watched. By evening, my phone rang. I looked at the screen. Claire. For the first time in weeks. I let it ring. Not out of anger. Just because now, I understood something she didn't. Silence, when used carefully, can say much more than words. I didn't return the call. Not the first time. Not the second. By the third, I turned my phone face down on the table and went back to my tea. Letting it steep a little longer than usual. There was no urgency anymore. That was the difference. By the next morning, there was a message. Hi Mom, it's Claire. I've been trying to reach you. Please call me back. Polite. Careful. Almost respectful. I read it once, then set the phone aside. Because tone, I've learned, can change very quickly when circumstances do. It didn't take long for the shift to become visible. That same afternoon, my phone rang again. This time, it was Daniel. I let it ring twice before answering. Hi, Mom, he said, his voice tight in a way I hadn't heard in years. Have you been to the bank recently? I didn't answer right away. I have, I said calmly. There was a pause. Then, Claire said something about issues with payments? I leaned back in my chair, looking out the window at the quiet street. What kind of issues? I asked. Another pause, longer this time. I'm not exactly sure, he admitted. Something about the auto loan? They said a payment didn't go through. Of course it didn't. I had made sure of that. I see, I said. Mom, did something happen? He asked. And for a moment, I heard it, the old tone. The one from years ago. The one that used to check in on me without hesitation. I could have explained everything right then. Every document, every signature, every quiet decision that had been made without me. But I didn't. Not yet. I think it's better if we talk in person, I said. There was relief in his voice. Yeah, of course. We can come by tonight. I noticed that. After I hung up, I didn't rush to prepare anything. No special dinner, no carefully set table. Just the same house, the same quiet. Because this meeting wasn't about hosting. It was about truth. Around 6, I heard the car pull into the driveway. Not mine. Hers. The Lexus. Even from inside, I could hear the engine, smooth, confident, unbothered. For now. When I opened the door, Claire was already standing there, her smile in place. But it wasn't the same smile. There was something underneath it now. Tension. Calculation. "Hi," she said softly. I stepped aside. "Come in." Daniel followed behind her, his eyes moving around the room like he was trying to read something that wasn't written. We sat in the living room. No one spoke at first. Claire was the one who broke the silence. "There seems to have been some kind of mistake with the bank," she said, her voice carefully measured. "The car payment didn't go through, and they mentioned changes to the account." I watched her. Not her words. Her hands. Still, controlled, but tighter than before. "I made some changes," I said. Daniel looked at me. "What kind of changes?" I folded my hands in my lap. "The kind that make sure I understand exactly what I'm paying for," I replied. Claire's smile faltered, just slightly. And in that small moment, I knew she understood. The silence that followed wasn't empty anymore. It was full. And for the first time since all of this began, they were the ones trying to catch up. Claire recovered quickly. I'll give her that. People like her always do. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," she said, her voice softer now, almost careful. "The car, it's under a shared arrangement. Daniel and I have been handling things." Handling things. I let the words sit in the room for a moment. Then I looked at Daniel. "Have you?" I asked. He hesitated. "Just enough. I thought," he started, then stopped. "I thought everything was set up properly." Of course he did. Because he hadn't set it up. I turned back to Claire. "The loan is in my name," I said. "The payments came from my account. And the contact information was changed so I wouldn't be notified." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Claire's posture shifted, almost imperceptibly. "That wasn't intentional," she said quickly. "It was just easier to manage everything from one place." "Easier?" "Yes," I said. "I imagine it was." Daniel looked between us, confusion settling in. "Claire, what is she talking about?" Claire let out a small breath, like she had been preparing for this moment but hoping it wouldn't come. "We consolidated some things," she said, "just to make payments smoother. Your mom didn't need to worry about all the details." I watched her closely. Every word chosen. Every sentence shaped to sound reasonable. "I wasn't worried," I said. The room went quiet again. "I wasn't worried," I repeated, "because I didn't know." That landed. I saw it in Daniel's face. The shift. The realization that something had been done, without being said. "Mom, I didn't know it was set up like that," he said, his voice lower now. "I thought we were paying for the car ourselves." I believed him. Not because I wanted to. But because I recognized that kind of confusion. It wasn't calculated. It was absent. Claire turned toward him slightly. "We were going to fix it," she said quickly. "Once things stabilized, it was temporary." Temporary. 18 months of payments. Silence. Blocked calls. "Yes," I said, "I'm sure it was." I stood up then, not abruptly, just enough to change the energy in the room. They both looked at me. "I've already removed all access to my accounts," I said, "and I've stopped the payments." Claire's expression tightened. Just for a second. "But the next payment is due this week," she said, before she could stop herself. There it was. Not concern. Not apology. Just logistics. I nodded. "Yes," I said, "I'm aware." Daniel looked at her. "Wait, so what does that mean?" he asked. Claire didn't answer. She didn't need to. We all knew. "It means," I said calmly, "that the responsibility now belongs to the people who chose the car." No anger. No accusation. Just clarity. The silence that followed was different this time. Heavier. Not because of what was said, but because of what could no longer be hidden. Claire looked down at her hands. Daniel leaned back slightly, like he needed distance from something he was just beginning to understand. And I stood there, steady, watching them both. Because this wasn't the moment of confrontation. Not fully. This was the moment of exposure. I didn't block your calls to hurt you, Claire said suddenly, her voice quieter now. I looked at her. I know, I replied. And I did. She hadn't done it to hurt me. She had done it to avoid this moment. But moments like this don't disappear. They wait. Patiently. Just like I had. And now. They were finally here. I didn't say anything else that night. Not after that. Because there's a moment, when the truth has already landed, where speaking more only weakens it. And I had no intention of weakening anything. They didn't stay long. Daniel stood up first, running a hand through his hair like he used to when he was a boy trying to solve a problem too big for him. We'll figure this out, he said quietly. I nodded. I'm sure you will. Claire didn't meet my eyes when they left. She walked out first, her steps quick, controlled. Daniel followed behind her, slower this time. The door closed softly. And just like that, the house was quiet again. But it wasn't the same quiet. This one felt earned. The next morning, I made my coffee the same way I always did. 2 scoops, a little cream, no sugar. Routine has a way of keeping things steady when everything else shifts. I sat at the table, the sunlight stretching across the floor, and opened my notebook. I didn't write much. Just one line. Wait. Because this wasn't over. Not even close. By noon, the first call came. Not from Claire. From the finance company. Mrs. Carter, we're reaching out regarding a missed payment on your auto loan. It's no longer my responsibility, I said calmly. There was a pause on the other end. I see. Well, the account is still under your name. For now, I replied. That's being addressed. I gave them my attorney's contact information. Then I hung up. An hour later, Daniel called again. This time, I answered. Mom, they're saying the payment didn't go through, he said, his voice tight with something new now. Not confusion. Pressure. I'm aware, I said. Claire said there must be some mistake. That may be the bank. There's no mistake, I interrupted gently. Silence. Then, quieter. What do you mean? I took a sip of my coffee before answering. I mean the payments stopped because I stopped them, I said. Another pause. Longer this time. But, Mom, we can't just, he began. Then stopped. We. Still we. You can, I said softly, you just haven't yet. That landed differently. I could hear it. Claire said it was temporary. He added, almost defensively now, that it was just easier this way. Yes, I said, I heard that. And it wasn't, he asked. I looked out the window, watching a car pass slowly down the street. It was easier, I replied, just not for me. He didn't respond right away. And in that silence, I could almost hear the shift happening inside him. Not complete. Not yet. But beginning. They're asking for the next payment by Friday, he said finally. I nodded, even though he couldn't see it. I'm sure they are. So, what do we do? He asked. Not what should you do. What do we do? I set my cup down carefully. You decide what the car is worth to you, I said, and whether you're willing to pay for it. There was a sharp inhale on the other end. Mom? I've already decided what it's worth to me, I continued. Silence again. When he spoke next, his voice was quieter. Claire's really stressed, he said. I almost smiled. Not out of satisfaction. Just recognition. Yes, I said, I imagine she is. After we hung up, I didn't move for a while. I just sat there, listening to the quiet settle back into place. Because the truth had done what it always does. It had shifted the weight. And for the first time in a long time, that weight was no longer mine to carry. The meeting happened 3 days later. Not at my house. Not at theirs. At Thomas's office. Claire arrived first. Of course she did. sitting straight-backed in the chair across from the desk, hands folded neatly in her lap, dressed as if this were just another appointment she intended to manage. Daniel came in a few minutes after, his expression tighter than I had ever seen it. He looked at me, then at her, then finally at Thomas. "Can someone just explain what's going on?" he asked. Thomas didn't rush. He never did. "We're here to clarify ownership, responsibility, and authorization," he said calmly, specifically regarding the auto loan under Mrs. Carter's name. Claire shifted slightly. "It's not as complicated as it sounds," she said quickly. "We had an arrangement." "There was no arrangement," I said. I didn't raise my voice. But it stopped her. Thomas opened the file in front of him. "These are the signed authorization forms," he said, sliding copies across the desk. "They granted account access, but not permission to initiate a personal loan in Mrs. Carter's name." Daniel leaned forward, scanning the papers. "Claire didn't touch them. I never intended for it to stay that way," she said. "It was temporary. We were going to transfer it later." Thomas nodded slightly. "That may have been the intention," he said, "but legally, the loan remains under Mrs. Carter, and the payments were made exclusively from her account." Silence. Daniel looked up. "Claire, is that true?" She hesitated. "Just long enough. We were covering other expenses," she said. "This was just easier for a while." "Easier?" The same word. "For 18 months?" I asked. She didn't answer. Thomas closed the folder gently. "Mrs. Carter has already revoked all access and ceased payments," he said. "From this point forward, the lender will pursue the registered borrower, unless a formal transfer is completed." Daniel's head turned sharply. "Transfer?" "Yes," Thomas said. "The loan can be reassigned. But it requires cooperation, credit approval, and immediate financial responsibility." Claire finally reached for the papers. Her composure was still there, but thinner now. "What happens if we don't transfer it?" she asked. Thomas met her eyes. "Then the vehicle is at risk of repossession," he said, "and the financial consequences will follow the current borrower, unless legally disputed." I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Daniel leaned back slowly, the weight of it settling in. "All this time," he murmured. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at her. "I was trying to help," Claire said, her voice quieter now. "Your mom didn't need to deal with all this." I folded my hands. "I didn't deal with it," I said, "because you made sure I couldn't." That was the first time she didn't respond immediately. Thomas let the silence sit. Then he spoke again. "There are two paths forward," he said. "Either the loan is transferred and payments resume under the correct party, or the lender proceeds with recovery." Clear. Simple. Final. Daniel exhaled slowly. "We'll transfer it," he said. Claire looked at him. "Daniel. We'll transfer it," he repeated. For the first time since this began, she looked unsure. Not angry. Not defensive. Just uncertain. I stood up then. Not abruptly. Just enough to signal I was done. "I'll leave the rest to you," I said. Daniel looked at me. "Mom?" I met his eyes. "I've done my part," I said. And that was the truth. Because this was never about taking something from them. It was about returning something to myself. Control. Clarity. And the quiet understanding of exactly where I stood. As I walked out of the office, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Because whatever happened next would finally belong to them. A week later, I received a letter. Not unexpected. Just official. It was from the finance company. Clean envelope, clear language, no emotion. Inside, it confirmed what Thomas had already explained. The loan had been flagged. Payments had stopped. And a request for transfer had been initiated, but not yet completed. I sat at my kitchen table. The letter unfolded neatly in front of me, my reading glasses resting low on my nose. I didn't feel anxious. Just observant. Because by then, I understood something I hadn't before. Consequences don't arrive loudly. They arrive, on paper. That afternoon, Daniel called again. I answered. "Mom, we're trying to fix it," he said quickly. Before I could even speak, The bank needs more documents. Claire's credit. There are delays. I listened. Didn't interrupt. They're saying it might take a few weeks. He continued. In the meantime, they're asking for a payment to keep everything current. There it was. Not a request. Not quite. But close. I see, I said. Silence. Then, Mom, could you just cover this one more payment? Just until everything is transferred? His voice was careful now. Measured. Not demanding. But hopeful. I looked down at the letter again. At the numbers. At the dates. 18 months of quiet withdrawals. 18 months of not knowing. No, I said. Not harsh. Not emotional. Just clear. There was a pause on the other end. Long enough that I could almost hear his thoughts catching up with the word. No, he repeated. No, I said again. I won't be making any more payments. Mom, it's just temporary, he said, the old phrase returning like it had never left. We're fixing it. We just need a little time. I leaned back in my chair. I gave you time, I said. You just didn't tell me how it was being used. Silence. I didn't know, he said quietly. And again, I believed him. But belief doesn't undo action. That may be true, I said, but I still paid for something that wasn't mine. Another pause. He exhaled slowly. Claire's really struggling with this, he added. I almost smiled. Not out of satisfaction. Just recognition of the pattern. Yes, I said, I imagine she is. When we hung up, I folded the letter and placed it back in its envelope. Carefully. The way I do with things that matter. That evening, I went for a walk. Nothing far. Just around the block. The air was cool, the sky just beginning to dim. Ordinary. Peaceful. As I passed a parked car, another Lexus. Different model, I slowed for a moment. Looked at it. Not with anger. Not with resentment. Just understanding. Because it was never really about the car. It was about what it represented. Access. Assumption. And the quiet belief that I wouldn't notice. But I had. Maybe later than I should have. Maybe slower than some would. But I had. And now. I wasn't the one adjusting anymore. They were. And for the first time in a long time. That felt exactly right. The car was gone 2 weeks later. No announcement. No explanation. Just gone. I noticed it the next time I drove past their house. The driveway looked different without it. Emptier. Quieter. Like something that didn't quite belong there had finally been removed. I didn't stop. I didn't need to. Because by then, I already knew how the story had ended. Daniel called that evening. Not rushed this time. Not pressured. Just quiet. They took it, he said. I stood by the window, looking out at the fading light. I see, I replied. We couldn't finalize the transfer in time, he continued, and Claire didn't qualify on her own. There was no anger in his voice. Just something heavier. Understanding, perhaps. I'm sorry, Mom, he said after a moment. That word. Sorry. It had taken a long time to arrive. I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't hear him. But because I wanted to make sure what I said mattered. I'm not upset about the car, I said finally. And it was the truth. I should have paid more attention, he added. I should have asked questions. Yes, I said gently, you should have. Silence. But not the kind we used to have. This one was honest. After we hung up, I made myself a cup of tea and sat in my usual chair. The same chair I had sat in the night I first realized something was wrong. The same room. The same quiet. But everything felt different now. A few days later, Daniel came by alone. No Claire. He stood at the door for a moment before I opened it. Like he wasn't sure if he should knock again. I stepped aside. Come in, I said. We sat at the kitchen table. No tension this time. Just space. I didn't know how much she had access to. He said, I trusted her. I nodded. I know. And I thought, since it was all under control, you didn't need to worry about it. I looked at him. I didn't need to worry. I said, I needed to know. He lowered his eyes. We didn't talk about Claire much after that. Not directly. Some things don't need to be repeated to be understood. Before he left, he paused by the door. "I'll make sure it doesn't happen again," he said. I believed him. Not because he promised, but because now, he had seen. That evening, I went through my paperwork one last time. Closed the folder. Placed it back in the drawer. Not hidden. Just where it belonged. Because this story was never about revenge. It wasn't about proving anything. It was about something much simpler. Something I had almost forgotten. That even at this stage of life, I still had a voice. I still had control. And most importantly, I still had the right to be seen. She blocked my calls. For weeks. Maybe longer. But in the end, it wasn't me who was left unheard. And as I turned off the light that night, the house settling into its familiar quiet, I realized something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not anger. Not sadness. Just peace.